Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today we are going to be doing a deep dive
Ooh, deep dive.
into the idea of reversing aging.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at specifically an interview with a guy named Richard Thompson. He's an expert in anti-aging technology.
Interesting.
And this is from a podcast called Decoding Death. So
Okay.
we're going to be looking at
Let's see.
reversing aging. What's it all about?
All right. So I think the interesting thing here is that he makes this distinction between chronological age, like literally how many years you've been alive, versus biological age, which is how old are your cells, really?
Okay.
And that's really what we care about, right? Like if you can be 80 years old, but your cells are like 50.
Yeah, what does that even mean? You
Right.
know, like what could you do if you felt 50 but you were 80?
Right.
And he points to these three different areas of research that are trying to make this a reality.
Okay.
One is cellular reprogramming. Another is senolytics.
Senolytic.
And the last one is gene therapy.
Okay, so cellular reprogramming. It's kind of like hitting the reset button on your cells.
Okay.
So they use these things called Yamanaka factors, which are these proteins that can reprogram your cells back into like stem cells.
Huh.
So it's like taking your cells back to their factory settings.
So it's like you're wiping away all the damage that's accumulated over time.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That's wild. Okay, and then there's this thing you mentioned called senolytics.
Right.
When I first heard that, I thought of some kind of like sci-fi weapon.
It does sound kind of like Star Wars-y.
Yeah.
So senolytics target these things called senescent cells.
Senescent cells.
Yeah, and basically these are cells that like they should have died off, but they haven't, and they're kind of like these zombie cells. They just kind of hang out,
Okay.
and they cause all sorts of problems as we age.
Like what?
Like they release all these harmful substances, they can damage the tissues around them, and they contribute to inflammation and stuff.
Ah, so they're like these little troublemakers running around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So senolytics come in, and they're designed to like remove these cells,
Oh.
get rid of the junk.
So it's not necessarily like making your cells younger, it's just like getting rid of the bad ones.
Yeah, more like cleaning up the mess.
Okay, what about gene therapy? How does that work?
So gene therapy is interesting because it focuses on like actually repairing or modifying the genes that are linked to aging.
Oh,
So it's like going right to the source code
right to the source code.
to try to fix those errors that lead to aging,
Okay, so you're going in and editing the genes themselves.
pretty much.
Wow, that's some next level stuff.
Yeah.
So is any of this actually close to becoming like a reality?
Well, Richard seems to think so. He estimates that we might see some of these treatments within the next 10 to 20 years.
10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's still early days. There's still a lot of research to be done.
Okay, so no immortality pills just yet.
Not quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
But things are moving quickly, especially with AI and machine learning speeding things up.
That makes sense. So more people are getting involved in this research.
Yeah, it's attracting a lot of brilliant minds and a lot of investment.
Okay, that's good to hear. So what happens if these treatments actually do become available in the next 10 to 20 years? Like, what does that even mean for us?
Well, I think that's when things get really interesting. I mean, it could change everything about how we live our lives.
Yeah, I mean, like, how would work even look? Would we still retire?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the whole concept of retirement might become obsolete.
Wow.
And what about healthcare and Social Security? Like, how do you plan for a society where people are living decades longer?
And education, too, right? Like, if people are living longer, do you really need to cram all your education into, like, the first 20 years of your life?
Right. Maybe it's more about lifelong learning.
It's like the concept of growing old would take on a whole new meaning.
Exactly. Instead of being about decline, it could be about continued growth.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But doesn't that also raise some concerns? Like, what about overpopulation if people are living longer?
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. And what about resources? How do we ensure there's enough for everyone if people are living longer?
Right, like food and energy and housing.
Exactly.
It sounds like extending lifespan would force us to confront some pretty big challenges.
It would. And it would also raise questions about fairness. Like who gets access to these treatments if they're expensive or limited?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine them being cheap or easily accessible right away.
Definitely not at first.
So there are a lot of ethical considerations here.
Definitely. It's not just about the science. It's about how we use that science and what kind of world we want to create.
Well, this is a lot to think about.
It is. But it's important to have these conversations now.
So we're not just caught off guard when these treatments become available.
Exactly. We need to be prepared for the future.
Well, it sounds like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic. There's still so much more to explore.
There is.
So let's take a quick break and come back to dive even deeper into this fascinating world of reversing aging.
Sounds good.
Hmm.
I'm ready for more.
All right, we'll be right back after a short break.
Okay.
All right, so we're back. And we're talking about all this wild stuff about reversing aging.
Yeah, and like we were saying before the break, it could really change how society works.
Yeah, like imagine people living decades longer. How does that affect things like work and retirement?
Right. Like, what even is retirement in a world where people are healthy and active well into their 80s or 90s?
It's like our whole concept of retirement would have to be completely rethought.
Exactly. Like maybe instead of stopping work completely, people would just transition into different roles or work part-time.
Or maybe they'd take more breaks throughout their careers to pursue other interests.
Right? Like imagine having multiple careers over your lifetime. You could be a doctor for 20 years
Yeah.
and then switch to being an artist or a writer.
That would be amazing. And think about the impact on education, too. If people are living longer and staying active mentally for much longer,
It would completely change how we think about learning.
yeah, it wouldn't just be about cramming everything into your early years.
Right. It would be more about continuous learning and development throughout your life.
It's like the idea of growing old would take on a whole new meaning.
Totally. Instead of being about decline and slowing down, it could be about continued growth and exploration.
So instead of dreading getting older, it could be something to look forward to.
Yeah, and think about all the amazing things people could accomplish if they had more time.
Like, imagine the scientific breakthroughs, the artistic masterpieces, the technological advancements.
The possibilities are truly mind-boggling.
But of course, we have to consider the potential downsides, too.
Like what?
Well, one of the things Richard Thompson brought up was the impact on population growth.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
If people are living significantly longer, could that lead to overpopulation and a strain on resources?
It's a valid concern. We'd have to find ways to manage population growth more effectively.
And we'd also have to think about how we use our resources more sustainably.
Right. We'd need to develop more efficient technologies and explore alternative energy sources.
And maybe even rethink our consumption patterns as a society.
It's like extending lifespan would force us to confront some of the big existential challenges we're already facing.
Both a greater sense of urgency.
Exactly. We wouldn't be able to kick the can down the road anymore.
And it would also raise questions about fairness and equity.
Like, how do we make sure that everyone has access to these life-extending treatments?
Right, because it's unlikely that they'll be cheap or readily available, at least initially.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine a scenario where these treatments become a luxury only accessible to the wealthy.
Which would further exacerbate existing inequalities.
Exactly. And it would also raise questions about intergenerational dynamics.
How so?
Well, if people are living longer, how does that affect relationships between generations?
Like between parents and children or grandparents and grandchildren?
Right. Like imagine interacting with your great-great-grandparents. That's a whole new level of family history.
It could create some really interesting family dynamics.
It could also lead to challenges in terms of inheritance, social hierarchies, and even just how we structure our communities.
It's like we'd have to rethink our entire societal framework.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
So extending lifespan isn't just a matter of scientific advancement.
It's also about societal adaptation.
It would require a fundamental shift in how we think about aging, work, family, and even the very structure of our communities.
It would be a massive undertaking.
But also an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, to create a world where people can live longer, healthier, and more fulfilling lives.
I think what's really important is that we start having these conversations now,
Before these treatments become a reality.
so we can be prepared for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
And shape the future in a way that benefits everyone.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating discussion, but we're running out of time for this part of our deep dive. So let's take another quick pause and come back to wrap up our exploration of this groundbreaking topic. Stay with us. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into reversing aging. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and there's still so much to uncover about how this could reshape our world.
Yeah, like we were saying before the break, Richard Thompson really emphasized that this isn't just about living longer.
Right. It's about living better for longer, extending our health span.
Which, I mean, that just completely changes the game, right?
It does. Imagine a world where people are in their 80s or 90s and still feeling vibrant and active.
Yeah, contributing to society, pursuing their passions. It's like aging wouldn't be this thing we dread anymore.
Exactly. It would be more like another chapter of life full of possibility.
Richard even talked about how this could lead to a surge in creativity and innovation.
Oh, yeah. With more time to hone their skills and explore new ideas, who knows what people could achieve.
It's exciting to think about all the potential breakthroughs in art, science, technology.
It really makes you wonder what humans are capable of if we weren't limited by our current lifespan.
Right, like what if we had decades or even centuries to dedicate to our passions?
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are some big questions we need to address.
Yeah, like how do we manage population growth and resource allocation if people are living significantly longer?
It's a huge challenge. But maybe it would force us to be more innovative and find sustainable solutions.
Maybe it would push us to explore new frontiers and come up with ways to live more efficiently.
And it would also raise questions about fairness and access to these treatments.
Right. Will everyone benefit equally, or will it create even greater disparities between the haves and have-nots?
It's something we need to be mindful of as these technologies develop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to live a longer, healthier life.
This whole conversation has really made me rethink my own perspective on aging.
In what way?
Well, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeing it as something negative, decline and deterioration.
Yeah, that's kind of the default narrative, isn't it?
But what if we could change that story? What if we could embrace aging as a continued process of growth and discovery?
I like that. Shifting the perspective from decline to continuous development.
And Richard's work really highlights that potential, that we can redefine what it means to age.
It's not about denying the realities of aging, but about challenging our assumptions and embracing new possibilities.
It's about expanding the definition of what it means to live a full and meaningful life.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole field of research so fascinating.
It's not just about pushing the boundaries of science, it's about pushing the boundaries of human potential.
And it's a conversation that's just getting started.
So we encourage you to keep exploring this topic, keep asking questions, and keep imagining the possibilities.
Because the future of aging is something we can shape together.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of reversing aging. Until next time, keep diving deep.